So UFC London, Aspinall versus Tybura just wrapped up, and I've matched up every single winner on the card with who I believe that they should fight next. You're gonna have to bear with me a little bit. I might recall the fights a little bit incorrectly. I watched these at 4 a.m. in the morning is when the card starts, so I struggled a little bit to get through the fights for 6 to 7 a.m. because man, I was tired. But speaking of getting tired, Aspinall put Marcin Tybura, didn't really put him to sleep, but he put him out. He won in the first round. Options. It depends if John Jones retires. If John Jones goes out there, beats Stipe Miocic, and retires, I want to see Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich for the vacant title. However, I want to see Sergey Pavlovich versus John Jones. And then in the meantime, you can do Cyril Gane versus Tom Aspinall, which is pretty much what he called for. He called for the winner of Gane versus Spivak. I think Gane wins. It's pretty hard to tell, but I do believe that Cyril Gane probably will beat Sergey Spivak. If Sergey Spivak wins, he can do that fight as well. But he said that he wants to fight the winner of Gane versus Spivak. I think it would be Gane. That's the fight to make if John Jones does fight Sergey Pavlovich, because Sergey Pavlovich is going to be weighing in as the backup for that fight. And then Pavlovich can fight Jones, and then you can do Aspinall versus Pavi if he beats Jones. And then Aspinall, you guys know what I mean. There's lots of options, but I do believe that Tom Aspinall versus Gane, which what he called for, does make the most sense. Yulia Stoliarenko upset everybody, upset the UFC by beating Molly McCann. I mean, I should have picked Stoliarenko in hindsight. Hindsight's always 2020, but I did have a feeling that McCann was going to lose this, because when I was watching a McCann fight, like, she genuinely does have no idea what she's doing on the ground. But Stoliarenko's just been so unreliable recently. It's kind of just been one of those things. And Stoliarenko also made weight as well. I think she's actually lost. She's lost a lot of weight as well, like physically. So she probably started cutting from a lower weight and then made 125. She looks in great shape. She looked good in this fight. She was looking good on the feet against Molly McCann. Stoliarenko's a girl that seems to not be too scared of taking hard fights. So I've given her another pretty difficult fight. I think Melissa Gatto versus Julia Stoliarenko would be good. I was thinking of giving Julia Stoliarenko an easy fight to kind of reward her for fighting Molly McCann, but unfortunately, I know the UFC will never do that. They're probably going to do something along the lines of this. So I've got Melissa Gatto versus Julia Stoliarenko. Gatto's pretty low in the ranks. You know, she's on a 2-fight losing streak now. And I think that Stoliarenko versus Gatto could be interesting, because they're both grapplers for the most part. Gatto was a decent striker, but it'll be interesting. I think Stoliarenko might even be able to beat Gatto. I mean, she looked so good against Molly McCann. It might be a thing where Molly McCann is just so bad that Stoliarenko looked so good. But we're going to find out if Yulia Stoliarenko can win her next fight. That would answer a lot of questions. For Nathaniel Wood, him and Lerone Murphy have been disagreeing with each other for a while, so I kind of just want to do that fight and get it done with. They're both pretty similarly ranked. They're both borderline in the rankings. I know it's a little bit lazy to do this, but Nathaniel Wood versus Lerone Murphy is the fight that I would like to do. The reason why is just they don't like each other. They just don't like each other. I think it's more Lerone Murphy seems to be the one that's kind of more of an instigator here. Nathaniel Wood seems to be pretty willing to put it to bed, but yeah, there was a clip that surfaced of them jawing away at each other. I think you could do Nathaniel Wood versus Lerone Murphy on another UK card. I think it would be a waste to not put it on a UK card. And speaking of UK cards, Paul Craig beat Andre Muniz, and this is my idea. I think you do Paul Craig, I believe it's Glasgow, is a big city in Scotland. Paul Craig headlining a Scotland fight night, because Paul Craig, and if you go down the card, it's a long card, Chris Duncan also won. You've got a couple of Scottish fighters. There's a couple of really good Scottish fighters as well on the regional scene that you can sign. So here's what I'll do, is have Paul Craig versus Jack Hermansson headlining a card either in Sweden or in Scotland, probably more in Scotland. And then on that card, you can do Lerone Murphy versus Nathaniel Wood. And throughout this video, I'm actually going to do a little bit of a card builder for that event. So I think Jack Hermansson versus Paul Craig would make sense. Paul Craig also called for Bo Nickel. I think the UFC is going to build up Bo Nickel slowly. So Paul Craig could be an eventual opponent, but not an opponent right now. I can see Paul Craig versus Jack Hermansson. It's just a logical fight. Everybody is saying that this fight should be made. It just makes the most sense. I mean, Jack Hermansson isn't booked. A lot of the UFC ranked fighters are booked. So Hermansson versus Craig headlining a card in Scotland. Maybe the start of next year, like January, February next year. I know that's a long time away, but I think the UFC's planning on going to Scotland next year. So if you let Paul Craig and Hermansson sit down a little bit, maybe that Hermansson doesn't want to wait that long, but Craig versus Hermansson, you could do Wood versus Murphy on there. And then for Faris Yam, he just beat Jai Herbert by decision. Looks really good. I want him to maybe, hopefully, best case scenario, turn around in about 5 weeks' time and fight on the France card. Now, with Friese, he could fight absolutely anybody on the France card, but you've got to get somebody that will be ready and willing to fight on that France card. And I think Claudio Puelles is that guy. Now, Claudio Puelles is a bit of a interesting case. He's 5-2 in the UFC, which is crazy. I think him versus Friese could be interesting. It could be very interesting for many, many reasons. I don't know what Puelles is up to since he got embarrassed by Hooker, but we haven't seen anything of him. I think him versus Friese could be interesting. Otherwise, you could do Friese versus literally anybody that would be willing to fight him in France in the lightweight division. And then you can go down to Daniel Marcos. I thought he lost to Davy Grant. I picked Davy Grant in that fight as well, so I was really, really kind of annoyed at that decision. But one thing that definitely is for sure, Daniel Marcos is about as good as I thought he was, which isn't that good. So I would rather the UFC use Daniel Marcos' 15-0 record to build up another prospect. So the prospect that I've given him is, you could do like Javid Basharat or even Farid Basharat, but the prospect that I've given him is Rinya Nakamura. I would like to see Rinya Nakamura versus Daniel Marcos, and the reason why I want to see this is Rinya Nakamura, in my mind, I genuinely do believe this. Rinya Nakamura will be the UFC's first Japanese champion. And what better way to promote Rinya Nakamura than have him beat a 15-0 opponent in Daniel Marcos? And not only that, I think Rinya Nakamura would beat Daniel Marcos in under a round. I genuinely do. He's got a fight coming up against Franny Garcia. As soon as he beats Franny Garcia, which he will do probably in under 2 minutes, do Rinya Nakamura versus Daniel Marcos, undefeated versus undefeated. Whoever wins that fight, which will probably be Nakamura, you can build on them, and then whoever loses, you can just do whatever you want. But the thing about Daniel Marcos, he's a fraud. He's 15-0, but he is a fraud. I thought he was a fraud when I picked against him on Dana White's Contender Series. He beat, it was like Brandon Lewis or something like that. So, and then, he beat Simon Oliveira, who's just terrible at striking. Daniel Marcos is a fraud. Let's use him, his 15-0 record, to build up somebody else. Now we can move down to Johnny Parsons, who beat Danny Roberts. I don't think that this was a flawless performance. However, Johnny Parsons is a pretty fun fighter. He mentioned he wants to go down to 155 pounds. I don't know how I feel about that, and the reason why is he really struggled to make 170. He missed weight on his first attempt, and then he made 171 about an hour later. I think he is playing on 155, but the matchup that I've given him is a 170-pound fight, and it is a fun one. It's going to be Johnny Parsons versus Andre Fialho. I'm pretty sure Andre Fialho is still on the roster. If he's not, then this is just really dumb by me. But I'm pretty sure Andre Fialho is still on the roster. It would be a striker versus striker matchup. Unfortunately, Fialho's been KO'd a few times, but I'm pretty sure he's still on the roster. I think Andre Fialho versus Johnny Parsons is the fight to make. I think that makes sense. If not, you could just give him a lightweight. If he wants to fight a lightweight, he called out Paddy Pimblett, said he would go down to lightweight for it. But as I said before, he struggled to make 170, so I don't think the UFC would be too willing to give him a lightweight opponent just because he did struggle to make 170 pounds, but it'd be interesting to see. He didn't even look good on the scales either. It's not like he missed and then just came back and weighed in. He looked bad at 170 on the scales, so I don't like Johnny Parsons at 155. I think maybe just Andre Fialho at 170 if he gets by there. Looks good on the scales, then we can talk about 155, but speaking of 155, Joel Alvarez beat Mark Diakese. Sloppy fight, controversial finish. To be honest, guys, I've been up since 3 a.m. in the morning, so it's not really something I want to get into at this point, but Guram Kutatelidze said that he's going to make a comeback soon, and Joel Alvarez is borderline ranked. You know, his last loss was to Arman Sarukian recently. He just beat Mark Diakese, who probably is like a top 30, top 35 fighter at lightweight. Guram's a borderline ranked guy. Yes, he's coming off a loss, and yes, because he's coming off a loss, all of a sudden, Guram doesn't look as unbeatable as he did before, so Guram Kutatelidze versus Joel Alvarez. I think that would be a really interesting fight, and I think you could actually do that on the Scotland card that I was talking about as well. So Joel Alvarez versus Guram, maybe on that Scotland card, or maybe just on some sort of fight night card in the Apex or something. Depends if you want to promote Joel Alvarez because he is from Spain. Maybe actually Joel Alvarez versus Guram on that Spain card that I've been thinking of. Ilia Topuria versus Volkanovski in Spain as well. There's lots of options you could do with Joel, but I just think he should fight Guram. I think that's a fight that makes sense personally. McCann beat Jamal Pogues. Frustrating fight to watch because I picked Jamal Pogues, and I do still genuinely believe that Jamal Pogues has the skill set to beat McCann, but Pogues just didn't show up, and McCann actually, in my opinion, looked really, really good in that fight. I didn't know how to feel about him because he had never really fought anybody good whatsoever before he beat Jamal Pogues. So I'm going to give McCann an opponent in Chris Barnett. I think this is a fight that makes sense. I was going to do him versus Jake Collier, but Jake Collier is now booked up against Muhammad Usman. So Chris Barnett versus McCann. Chris Barnett was born in Spain, so you could do this on that Spain card, where what's it called? The Ilia Topuria versus Volkanovski card in Spain, if it is to happen. So I like the idea of Chris Barnett taking on McCann. You could do it in the United States as well. Maybe try and build up McCann's name in the States if he can beat and finish Chris Barnett. Barnett hasn't fought for a while. He pulled out from a fight earlier this year. Has not fought for a very long time. Maybe you could put this on the prelims of like a pretty big pay-per-view, early prelims maybe. Chris Barnett is a guy that is someone you want to put in front of a crowd. Maybe McCann isn't someone that you do because he had a pretty boring fight, but it would be a good way to promote McCann if he can beat Chris Barnett. And if Chris Barnett beats McCann, it'll probably be by some sort of highlight reel spinning kick anyway. So you can't really lose with that one, really. The next one is Muradov. He beat Brian Barberena. I think you should fight Marc-Andre Barriault. Now, there's a lot of options. Maybe you could do him versus Bonacul. But I think Marc-Andre Barriault versus Muradov would be fun, because Marc-Andre's a striker with good takedown defense. All of a sudden, we're seeing Muradov implement a lot of wrestling. The first time we saw that was when he tried to wrestle Caio Borralho, which was an interesting game plan. But I don't really mind it, to be honest. I don't mind seeing more things from Muradov. It's frustrating that he couldn't finish Barberena, because Barberena was getting dropped. He was getting rocked. Muradov couldn't finish him. It was weird, but Muradov won, and that's kind of what matters. I wouldn't mind seeing him versus Marc-Andre Barriault. I think that is a fight that does make a bit of sense. And now for Brian Barberena, I think he should go back down to 170 pounds, to be honest. Ketlen Vieira beat Penny Kianzad. Who knows what you do with Ketlen Vieira, dude, because she lost a split decision to Raquel Pennington. It depends with what the UFC does with the title. If they do Pena versus Pennington, maybe they'll Pena versus Silva. You could do a Holly Holm rematch, maybe. You could do her versus Bueno Silva for the title shot. I mean, who knows? I've just gone with Irene Aldana on that Mexican Independence card, but I do know that I actually matched up Mara Bueno Silva with Irene Aldana, so yo, I just don't know. It depends what they do at the top of 135 pounds, or what you could do is Ketlen Vieira versus Norma Dumont. I believe they've actually fought each other before, Ketlen Vieira and Norma Dumont, because Norma Dumont said that she's going to come down to 135 pounds. Have they fought each other before? I don't think they do. So maybe you could do Ketlen Vieira versus Norma Dumont as well, actually, since Norma Dumont's going down to 135. I don't really know. It is a little bit of a mess right now, but yeah, Vieira versus Dumont would make sense, because Dumont's a former featherweight and Vieira's massive, 135. So the next one is Chris Duncan. He beat Jan Alashmuz. I'm still not sold on Chris Duncan, man. Like, I tweeted out on Twitter, like, did this fight increase his stock? Because, in my opinion, it didn't. If you look at Jan Alashmuz, after the first round, and between the first and the second round, I was freaking out on my live stream, because I was live streaming during the time. I did end it, because I pretty much was half asleep. But, my god, dude, Jan Alashmuz, he was sitting on this corner, and he kind of, like, moved his arm like this, and you could see that it was separated. Like, he had nothing, dude. And Chris Duncan couldn't finish a man that literally had one arm. Jan Alashmuz never threw the left hand. He somehow defended takedowns with one arm, but I feel like Chris Duncan must have not known that Jan Alashmuz only had one arm, otherwise he probably would have tried to exploit it with wrestling and stuff. I think this is actually a performance that might decrease Duncan's stock, just because Janelle got so injured. I thought it was a bad performance from Duncan. I really do. I think his debut was a bad performance. I think this was a bad performance. I'm still not sold on this guy, but he beat Jan Alashmuz, who only had one arm, and managed to win the second round on one judge's scorecard with one arm as well, by only throwing right hands. It was crazy. It really was. So I've gone with Chris Duncan versus Jordan Levitt. I think this is a fight that you could do in Scotland as well, on that Paul Craig card, obviously. I mean, Jordan Levitt's a pretty good fighter, but I do believe that Chris Duncan should be able to beat him up on the feet, because Levitt has no striking whatsoever, and Duncan seems to be a decent striker and a decent wrestler. So Jordan Levitt versus Chris Duncan, I think that makes sense to me. Now we can move down to Bruno Brazil. I think Bruno Brazil, she beat Shauna Bannon. I thought that maybe the UK judges could have given it to Bannon based on the first and the third round. Bannon just didn't look as good as I thought she would. She had no fight IQ. She wasn't aggressive like she should have been. She was doing things that would work. Like, every time Shauna Bannon boxed Bruno Brazil and put the pressure forward and marched forward, she had success. But when she was trying to kick with Bruno Brazil, that's when she lost. And she just kicked the whole time. Like, Shauna Bannon No fight IQ whatsoever. Like, unbelievably horrible fight IQ for Shauna Bannon. Like, she's so bad. Oh my god. Embarrassing performance for Shauna Bannon, in my opinion. Bruno Brazil should just fight Victoria Dudakova. The reason why I say this is Bruno Brazil, she's just not good. Like, she kind of sucks, and Victoria Dudakova actually has potential in the division. She took no damage in her last fight. Bruno Brazil didn't really take a lot of damage, so you could just do Victoria Dudakova versus Bruno Brazil. I think Dudakova would win that fight, and you could build a contender out of Dudakova by using Bruno Brazil, because Bruno Brazil would absolutely lose that fight. The next one is Jafel Filho he beat my boy, Danny Barrios. Oh, Danny Barrios was on his way to winning, dude. He dropped Jafel Filho twice with 2 different shots, one to the body and one to the head. I told you guys about Danny Barrios. I told you guys he could knock out Filho, and he just didn't. Oh, he just couldn't defend the takedown, and then he got arm triangled. Anyway, I think you should do Jafel Filho versus Dennis Bondar. Yeah, just do Dennis Bondar versus Jafel Filho. It's kind of that simple, really. I know Dennis Bondar is 0-2 in the UFC, but she just got KO'd badly, didn't he? Oh yeah, he's not gonna want to come back. Oh, that's awkward. Oh, you could do anything then. Maybe like Carlos Hernandez, the guy that beats him, Jafel Filho versus him. Maybe Jafel Filho even versus like Tatsuro Taira. Potentially, that could be a good test for him. Like, just anything. Honestly, anything. But with all that being said, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm super tired. I woke up 3 a.m. this morning. Yeah. I'll see you guys in the next one. UFC 291 predictions. I think they'll be out tonight. Maybe they won't be, but I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do appreciate it.